class, friends down the hall, any students, teachers, parents, anyone who's trying to learn during this crazy quarantine time. I started these videos to review things that my students learned in 5th grade this year, but then I realized I could keep them forever and use them for homework help, and that they probably can help students anywhere. So please like, subscribe, or share. Let's get as many people learning as possible. Parents, we learned math a long time ago and we learned it differently, so I'm hoping that these videos help you help your child at home as well, so you can better understand what's going on. So today we are going to cover adding mixed numbers. Before you watch this video, it would be really helpful for you to watch my video on making equivalent fractions and adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. We're going to be using those skills to be adding the mixed numbers. So let's get started. Let's say that we're thinking about 3 and 3/6 plus 2 and 1/3. Okay, we have mixed numbers. A mixed number is a whole number and a fraction together making a number, an amount, and same thing here. So we have 2 and 3/6 plus 2 and 1/3. The problem right now is that we don't have the same denominator. So we cannot combine 3 and 3/6 and 2 and 1/3 because we're not working with the same size pieces. I go over this in depth in making equivalent fractions and the adding and subtracting of fractions with unlike denominators, so make sure you check that out. If you are in my class, I have made it a requirement that you make an equivalent fraction box on the side of your work, so that we can keep track of the equivalent fraction stuff happening over here and then the mixed number stuff happening over here. So 3/6 and 1/3 do not have the same denominator, so I need to make a change. And I asked myself, when I count by 3s and when I count by 6, what's the lowest common multiple? So 6, 12, 18, or 3, 6, 9. Wait a minute, I said the same number, I said 6. So that's what we're going to be thinking about. A lot of times parents, the kids are going to want to do this and say, okay, I made an equivalent fraction, they have the same denominator now, but they actually didn't make an equivalent fraction. All they did was change the denominator, and we can't have that because this is a different amount. So 1/3 is not the same as 1/6. We need an equivalent fraction. So on the side of your paper, away from over here, you are going to figure out how to make 1/3 into sixths. And I go over this in the previous videos, so make sure you check them out. So I say to myself, how do I get from 3 to 6 with multiplication or division? That's all you're allowed to use when you're doing this. And I multiplied my denominator by 2. So that means I'm multiplying my numerator by 2. And if you're in my class, you're probably repeating that with me. So 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. So my equivalent fraction here is 2/6. So then we come and plug it in right here. 2 and 2/6. And then I didn't have to change this one, so I get 3 and 3/6. I'm going to erase my equivalent fraction box. You don't have to do that. I'm just going to run out of space because I bought the world's smallest whiteboard. All right, so strategies for adding mixed numbers. Well, you can use what you know about adding whole numbers, and you know that when you add whole numbers, you can break the two numbers apart and add them by place value, or any other way. You can add them anyway by breaking them apart, but that's a common way. Or you can keep one number whole and add on. So I'm going to go over both strategies. So once you make a common denominator, don't forget that part, there's a couple different ways we can add. The first one is I'm going to start with adding the whole numbers. So I'm going to say to myself, 3 plus 2 is 5. Okay, then I'm going to add the fractions. 3/6 plus 2/6 is 5/6. When we're adding fractions, the denominator is not changing. Once you've made an equivalent fraction, you have the same size pieces. When you combine the fractions, the denominator does not change. You're just adding the numerators together. Okay? So when I combined 3 plus 2, I got 5. When I combined 3/6 plus 2/6, I got 5/6. And now the last step is to combine your the two different answers you got. So the two different sums. 5 plus 5, 6 is 5 and 5, 6. So the answer is 5 and 5, 6. So to review what I did here, I added the whole numbers, I added the fractions, and then I combined the two sums to get my total of adding everything together. Okay, so that's one way that we can add mixed numbers, but that's not the only way we can add them. And parents, stand by because I'm going to do a number line. Okay, so another strategy is called keeping one number whole. That means that one of these numbers we're going to keep all together, and then we're going to break the other one up into parts. We can show this with equations, or we can show it on the number line. So I am going to do both. So when we are starting with keeping one number whole, I prefer to keep the larger number whole because adding the smaller number is a little bit less work. So what we're going to do is show down here, is my knee in the way? I hope not. We'll show down here that we're starting with 3 and 3, 6. That's the start here, 3 and 3, 6. I'm going to label it. Then I want to break up 2 and 2, 6 and add it in parts. So when I'm doing it with mixed numbers, it makes sense to add the whole number first. So if I add, I'm going to do a jump. To represent what I'm adding, I label what I'm adding to my jump. So what does this stand for? This stands for 3 and 3, 6 plus 2. And then what do I land on when I do 3 and 3, 6 plus 2? And a lot of kids know this. When you add 3 plus 2, you would get 5. And nothing changes with the 3, 6. It's just like whole numbers when we add a group of 10. The 10's place is going to change, but the 1's place is going to stay the same. So 3 and 3, 6 plus 2 is 5 and 3, 6. How much do I have left to add? Well, I already added the 2. I can see it here. So now I need to add the 2, 6. So I'm going to draw a much smaller jump because 2, 6 is much smaller than 2. I'm starting at 5 and 3, 6. From here, I'm adding 2, 6. And what do I land on? I land on 5 and 5, 6. So in this strategy, the answer is where I land. Let's review what you see. 3 and 3, 6. I added 2 and 2, 6 in parts. First, I added 2, and I landed on 5 and 3, 6. Then I added 2, 6, and I landed on 5 and 5, 6. So after starting with 3 and 3, 6, and then adding 2 and 2, 6, my final answer is 5 and 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to show that to you with equations up here, exactly what just happened. Okay, I was adding 3 and 3, 6 plus 2 and 2, 6. So first I did 3 and 3, 6. I kept this number whole. I did not split it up. And I added 2. That got me to 5 and 2, 6. Then from there, 5 and 3, 6. From there, 5 and 3, 6. From when I got here, then I added 2, 6 more to get to where I was finally going. And I ended on 5 and 5, 6. Parents, students, and if you're a teacher, I'm sure you're thinking, is she going to show us where we see everything? I want you to think about where do you see the add-ins, the numbers that we're adding, in each strategy. Okay? So, add in 3 and 3, 6. Where do we see it? We see it right here at the start because I kept that number whole. I kept it all together. But where do you see the 2 and 2, 6 that you added? I see the 2. Let me get another color. Let's do it in another color. I see the 2, the plus 2 here, and then I see the other 2, 6 I added here. So I did add a total of 2 and 2, 6. Again, down here, I see the 2 I added here, and then I see the 2 6 I added here. So I see my 3 and 3 6 that I started with, and then I see where I added the 2 and 2 6, and then where I ended with my final sum. You can also see it here. Okay, so those are the two different ways that you can add mixed numbers. You can either add whole number plus whole number, fraction like fraction, fraction plus fraction and combine, or you might want to add on in parts. So you might want to keep one number whole and then add on with the whole number and then the fraction. But then there's still one more strategy I'm going to go over just in case some kids want to try it. I won't do unlike denominators, we'll just get right into it. So let's try one more problem. All right, so let's say that I am starting with 7 and 7/8, and I want to add 2 and 3/8. There's a couple of options here, but I'm going to go over the number line first because that's the new strategy I want to teach you. So we're still going to keep one number whole, and I'm going to choose to keep 7 and 7/8 whole. So that's where I'm going to start. And then we do have the option of adding on in parts with the whole number and then also with the fraction after like we just did. But I see 7/8 is really close to 8/8, and that's my next whole number. So if I added 1/8 to this, I would have 7 wholes and 8/8, which is the same as 7 plus a whole. Okay, that's 8. And I love whole numbers. Working with whole numbers is so much more fun than working with fractions. So if you get to a whole number, then it's very easy to add from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add 1/8. I'm going to draw this tiny little jump. I'm going to label it 1/8, and I'm going to land on 8. So now I'm working with what I call anyways, a friendly number. When it's whole numbers, so much better than fractions. So then I have to ask myself, what is left to add? I've added 1/8 so far. I need to add a total of 2 and 3/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the 2. Because I know 8 plus 2, that's easy for me. Gets me to 10. So we want to keep track of what we've added so far. We've added 1/8 and we've added 2. So far I've added 2 and 1/8. I know I need to add a total of 2 and 3/8. So I ask myself, what's left over to make 2 and 3/8? What do I have left to add? I still have to add 2/8. And I would end up at 10 and 2/8 as my total. So where's the 2 and 3/8? I see 1/8 plus 2, that's 2 and 1/8. 2 and 1/8 plus 2/8 is 2 and 3/8. So what I did was I started with 7 and 7/8. I kept that number whole. I made a jump to land on a whole number so I could stop dealing with fractions. Who wants to do that anyway? Okay, then I continued adding what was left to add. I added the whole number 2 and then 2/8. Some students were probably like, Miss Conley, why didn't you just add 2 and 2/8 to be more efficient? You could do that too, okay? So this could be one big jump of 2 and 2/8. But where do we see the 2 and 3/8 that we added? I see 2, 1/8 plus 2/8 is 3/8. And where's my final answer? My final answer is what I landed on after I started at 7 and 7/8 and added 2 and 3/8. I would be at 10 and 2/8. Okay? You could have added 7 and 7/8 plus 2 and then plus 3/8 as well. Whatever you want to do is fine. But the reason why this is a great strategy for these numbers, you have to decide what's your best strategy. The reason this is the best strategy for these numbers is because when you add by whole numbers, because that might have been something you like doing, and then you add the fractions, you end up with an improper fraction, which gives you an extra step. So just to review, after you do that, you would combine these two. So you end up with 9 and 10/8. And you have to do some changing to mixed numbers. So 10/8 is the same as 8/8 plus 2/8. So then you end up with 9 plus 1 plus 2/8. Watch my video on making changing improper fractions to mixed numbers, and then you get your 10 and 2/8. So some students, when you start getting flexible with your thinking, you might see that that's a better strategy, is to jump to the whole number and then add the rest. You have to decide based on the numbers that you're given. Okay, so we went over 3 things, okay? We went over breaking both numbers apart. That's what we did here. We broke them both into whole numbers, then we did the fractions, and then we combined the 2 sums to get the total down here. Okay, on the number line, we practiced keeping one number whole, and then we added the whole number and then the fraction the first time. And then the second time, we kept one number whole, 7 and 7/8, and then we jumped to a whole number in order to make it easier for us. So you can break up this number however it makes sense to make it easy for you. I personally do like jumping to a whole number because then I'm not working with fractions anymore. I feel more comfortable with whole numbers. Okay, so if you're in my class and you have any questions, you can call me or text me when you're doing this work. If you're not and you don't know me, commonlymath@home@gmail.com. Any questions, if you want me to cover a different topic, go ahead and email me that. And like, subscribe, and share. Let's get as many students learning as possible while we're at home. Thanks, bye.